Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's Tuesday tip video, where in this video we're going to be talking about brake spring tension. So obviously this video is not going to apply to everyone, like if you don't have brakes, but if you do, I'm going to be talking about what spring tension is, why it matters, why it sometimes doesn't matter, and how you can use it to improve your brakes. So basically the main purpose to spring tension is to pull your brakes back after you pull them with your lever. So your brakes go in, spring tension is what brings them back out. And it also dictates how far the spacing is for your brake pads as well. If you have a straddle cable, like with a straight cable setup like on this frame, or if you have single to double lower gyro cables, you're going to have a straddle cable. Spring tension is very important because that's how you make your brakes pull evenly and get the exact same spacing on both sides of your rim. But if you have dual lower cables like I have, you can see that it's both cables independently back to the brakes, and the spring tension doesn't have as much to do with the spacing of the brake pads because you can adjust it manually with these barrel adjusters. And it doesn't matter as much to make your pads the same distance away from the rim. Basically, spring tension really matters to make them pull back evenly and for how hard it is to pull them with the brake lever. The tighter the springs, the harder it is to pull, but the faster they come back. The looser the springs, the easier it is to pull, but sometimes if they're too loose, the brakes won't come all the way back and you'll end up with a gap in your brake lever right here because your brakes aren't pulling it all the way shut again. So now that you know why it matters and doesn't matter with dual lower cables, let's talk about why it does matter with a straight cable setup or a single to double lower cable setup using a straddle cable. So honestly, up until just recently, a year or two ago, I did not realize that spring tension is how you change the spacing between your pads and your rim. I thought it was all up here, and I used these pins in the straddle cable setup in order to pull my cables tighter or looser in order to bring the pads the way that I thought they needed to go. But in reality, the way it works is, say this brake pad is too far away from the rim and the other side is too close. You need to be able to even them out a little bit. So what it means is that the spring tension on the opposite side, the side over here, is not as tight as the spring tension over here. The spring is too tight over here, pulling it back further or more powerfully than the other side. So what you would do is you would either loosen this side up just a little bit, or you tighten this side up, and that would in turn pull this side further away, or let it go further away and bring this side a little bit closer. The way you determine if you want to loosen or tighten either side is based on how you like your brakes to feel. If you want them to pull harder, then you make this other side tighter, making both sides have a tighter pull in general, and that makes it harder to pull. If you like it a little bit easier, then you would loosen this side, more or less evening out the spring tension and making them a little bit easier to pull and keeping them somewhat how they were. It doesn't matter a whole lot. I've just found that if your springs aren't tight enough, your brake lever won't come all the way back and you have to tighten them anyways. So I keep mine tight. So now that we've talked about spring tension and how it works, I'm going to give you a little bit of a visual. What I've done here is I've loosened this bolt so the spring is completely loose, and I've taken this cable out of the brake arm on that side. So as you can see, with no spring tension and it loosened completely up, if you push in on the brake arm, there's nothing to bring it back. It just moves freely and you basically have no brakes because there's nothing to bring it back away from the rim for you to pull it back again. So as you can see, if I twist the brake spring cap away from the rim, it pulls the brake pad away from the rim, and then when I tighten this down here in a second, you'll see how when I push on it, it pulls the pad away from the rim and returns it to its original position every single time. So I'm going to tighten that down and then we'll show you an example. Now that I've tightened the bolt, you can see that when I push on the brake arm and push the brake pad towards the rim and then let go, it automatically brings the brake arm back out and pulls the pad away from the rim just as it would as if we were pulling the brakes. So pushing in is basically the same thing as pulling the brakes, then letting go is the same thing as letting go, and you can see that the spring tension works as it should and pulls the brake pad away from the rim, allowing us to pull the brakes again and again and again. I'm not sure if you guys can see it or not in the camera, but it's extremely hard and takes a lot of effort to push the pad in towards the rim right now, and that's because the spring tension is extremely high and the spring is extremely tight. And what that means is if I set up both sides like this, the brakes would be hard to pull. If you like that setup, that's cool. If not, you would want to loosen the spring up a little bit and then get your pads evenly spaced away from the rim and then test the feeling again, and you can play with your spring tension and get it to where you like it. Basically, I like it right in the middle to where it's still somewhat easy to pull, but the brakes come back right away whenever I let go of them. How easy the brake arms are to push towards the rim is a good indication of how your brakes are going to feel. If you push on it and it's extremely easy and they barely come back or they don't come back all the way, obviously you're going to want to tighten it up, because once it's all together, the friction from the cables moving inside the housings is going to make the brakes not pull back all the way, and you're going to have to do it again anyways. So realistically, if it's hard to push in, you're going to want to loosen it up a little bit, and if it's extremely easy to push in and doesn't push back all the way, you're going to want to tighten it a little bit. And until you get experienced with brakes and you know what you like, you kind of have to play with it and go back and forth. Sometimes working on brakes is tedious, but if you work on them and you practice a little bit and you dial them in whenever they're not feeling good, you're going to get really good at it right away, and it'll be extremely easy, and you'll know exactly what you need to do to make your brakes feel exactly how you want them to feel. So when it comes down to it, brake spring tension is the main contributor for the way that brakes feel and pull, because it dictates both how hard they are to pull or easy they are to pull, as well as the spacing between the rim and the brake pads themselves. If you have a brake pad that's extremely close on one side and on the other side it's extremely far away, the extremely close side of course is going to hit first, then you're going to have to keep pulling until the extremely far away side hits, which in my opinion makes for inconsistent brakes that don't feel or brake as good as they could if they were aligned evenly. And with spring tension, you can make sure that your pads are evenly spaced so that they hit at the exact same time, and this combined with your spring tension the way that you like it will make brakes that you're not only happy with but work better than they would if they were set up to where one side was further away than the other, or the springs tension made for brakes that pulled differently than you liked. In my opinion, my brakes aren't good unless both pads are evenly spaced from the rim and hitting at the exact same time when I pull, and without the adjustment of dual lower gyro cables, the only way to make that happen is with spring tension. So I hope you guys learned something useful from this video, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching, guys. Goodbye.